Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are really undertaking a deep exploration. We're looking at the advanced blueprint for modern military operations. And this isn't just about tactics on the ground. We're analyzing the fundamental intellectual architecture, the doctrine, that dictates how the armed forces of the United States organize, command, and, well, employ their capabilities. Especially in this globally integrated environment we hear so much about.
That's right. And our goal here really is to give you a kind of high-level shortcut. We want to distill the core strategic principles, the ones senior leaders are actually using.
Okay.
We're looking at those foundational concepts that define decision-making at the very top echelons. Things like organizational structure, the principles of command, and the core operational mechanisms.
And to do that, we're grounding this conversation in the authoritative sources. You've got Joint Publication 1, Volume 1, which covers the fundamentals of joint warfighting.
The bedrock.
Exactly. Then there's Joint Publication 3.0, focusing on joint campaigns and operations.
Crucial for understanding how things actually play out.
And finally, Joint Publication 333, which details the structure of the Joint Force Headquarters itself. These aren't just suggestions, they are the authoritative basis for our discussion today.
Absolutely. And understanding these publications, it really provides the essential strategic context. It's how the U.S. military thinks about organizing, training, equipping its forces, basically how it confronts challenges now and anticipates future ones.
Okay, let's jump right in then, because the first big question has to be why. Why does this specific complex doctrine even exist?
Yeah.
I mean, these concepts feel like a direct response to some kind of major shift in the world. What changed? What's the necessity?
That's the core question, isn't it? The documents themselves, particularly Joint Publication 1, Volume 1, describe the current environment not as, a collection of separate problems, but as a mesh of complex, dynamic, adaptive systems.
So like what kinds of systems?
Well, political, diplomatic, military, economic, social, informational, infrastructure systems. The doctrine forces us to see these as all interconnected. Joint Publication 1, Volume 1 makes it really clear. This complexity means influencing one area inevitably ripples through the others. It creates this permanent, highly sensitive operational landscape we're always working within.
So that kind of interconnectedness makes the old model, dealing with threats region by region.
Yeah.
It makes it seem completely outdated.
Obsolete, really.
If a threat, an adversary, can operate globally, then focusing our response just on one geographical area, one combatant command, that seems, dangerously insufficient.
And that realization right there, that's the genesis. That's the driver behind this big push towards what the doctrine calls global integration.
Global integration.
Yeah. The doctrine now explicitly states, and this is a quote from Joint Publication 1, Volume 1, that focusing only on a single combatant command area may constrain effective joint warfighting against any threat with global reach and strategic depth.
So if the adversary doesn't respect our regional boundaries, our command structure can't afford to either. It has to operate across them seamlessly. But what does global integration actually look like in practice? What does it entail day to day for commanders?
Well, it demands continuous, really detailed decision-making, constant resource allocation, assessment. It's about synchronizing and, importantly, deconflicting diverse capabilities across the entire globe.
Deconflicting, meaning making sure actions in one place don't mess things up elsewhere.
Precisely. Often this happens through things like multi-combatant command coordination working groups. It's about ensuring activities in, say, the Pacific don't accidentally undermine or conflict with objectives being pursued over in Europe, especially if the adversary is active in both theaters. Joint Publication 333 really highlights this need for continuous coordination on the threat, on policy, ongoing activities, readiness, and crucially, prioritization.
That sounds like an incredibly complex, high-stakes juggling act for senior leaders, a constant state of awareness.
It is a very demanding process.
So how does the military then take the big picture goals, the things decided in Washington, and translate them into actual military tasks on the ground? How does that linkage work?
That's managed through a pretty classic construct. Ends, ways, and means. It formalizes how national policy connects down to military action.
Okay, ends, ways, means. Break that down for us.
So the president's national security strategy, that provides the foundational ends. These are the high-level policy objectives we're trying to achieve as a nation.
Got it. The what?
Right. Then the national defense strategy takes those ends and translates them into prioritized defense objectives. And it articulates the approach, the ways and the means for how the Department of Defense will actually use military forces to achieve those objectives. Joint Publication 1, Volume 1, specifically establishes this framework. It's the basis for all strategic guidance within the department.
And this framework, this whole process, it doesn't happen in a peaceful vacuum, right? The doctrine seems to suggest we're in a permanent state of international engagement, which brings us to this idea of the competition continuum.
Exactly. That's a key concept. Joint Publication 1, Volume 1 defines strategic competition as, and this is important, the persistent and long-term interaction that occurs between actors pursuing their interests across the competition continuum.
Persistent and long-term. So the doctrine doesn't really see a clear line between peacetime and wartime anymore.
Not really, no. It sees more of a blended environment, a spectrum, you could say.
What are the main sort of states along this continuum, and how do they relate?
There are three basic states: cooperation, competition, and armed conflict, or war. Now, the absolutely critical thing to understand is that cooperation and competition are always happening, simultaneously.
Always.
Always. The only thing that changes is whether armed conflict is also present or not. Cooperation, working with allies, partners, even sometimes with neutral actors, it's necessary for almost every significant military action the U.S. undertakes.
Okay, so cooperation is constant. Let's talk about that middle ground then. Competition. This is below the threshold of actual shooting war, but it sounds like the joint force is still incredibly active here. This seems like where things get really complex, maybe ambiguous.
Very much so. This is often called the gray zone. It's where state actors, and non-state actors too, pursue their competing interests, but short of using lethal force openly. According to Joint Publication 1, Volume 1, activities in this phase aim to preserve and expand friendly military and non-military advantages while limiting or eroding competitor operations.
So how do military forces operate in competition? What are they actually doing?
They're applying influence through things like security cooperation activities with partners, information operations, strategic positioning of forces. The goal is often to assure allies, deter potential adversaries, or sometimes even coerce competitors into changing their behavior, all without triggering open conflict.
It sounds like the competition phase relies heavily on information, non-military tools, blurring the lines between military moves and, say, diplomatic or economic pressure.
Precisely. That's a key feature. For instance, Joint Publication 1, Volume 1 talks about using information and even imagery to expose adversaries' illicit or malign activities. Think human rights abuses, treaty violations, expose them to global audiences.
Using transparency as a weapon almost.
In a way, yes. The goal might be to increase exploitation of an adversary's internal rifts or publicize their tactical blunders, maybe their logistical problems, to undermine their standing or sow doubt. It's a constant struggle for advantage using all the instruments of national power, not just the military hammer.
And then when deterrence fails, when those non-lethal efforts aren't enough, we potentially transition to the far end of the continuum. Armed conflict or war.
Right. And this phase is characterized by the continuous employment of lethal force. The joint force's objective here is to fight and win. But even in this phase, the doctrine stresses the goal of limiting escalation.
Especially given nuclear realities.
Absolutely. Joint Publication 1, Volume 1 is clear. While victory is the objective, command judgment must continuously monitor and manage risk. You have to ensure that tactical actions serve strategic ends without accidentally, triggering a much broader, perhaps catastrophic conflict.
Okay, so we've set the stage, this complex, globally integrated, competitive environment. Now let's pivot inside the military structure itself. How is this massive, complex machine actually managed? Let's talk command and control. Maybe start with the basics. Define command itself. The publications seem to make a distinction between just having the authority and the human element of it.
That's a really fundamental distinction they draw. Legally, Joint Publication 1, Volume 1 defines command as the lawful authority by virtue of rank or assignment that a commander exercises over subordinates. Pretty straightforward. This authority gives them the responsibility to organize, direct, coordinate, control military forces.
Right, the legal authority. But just having the rank, the position, that doesn't automatically make someone an effective commander, does it?
Yeah.
The doctrine then talks about the art of command.
Exactly. And the art of command. That's where leadership, judgment, experience, and expertise really come together. Joint Publication 1, Volume 1 describes this as the commander's ability to maximize performance through things like ethical leadership, courage, situational awareness, and crucially, the capacity to consider contrary views when making insightful decisions.
Considering contrary views, that sounds important in avoiding groupthink.
Vitally important. It's that human skill, honed through continuous professional military education, training, and real-world experience, that truly allows for effective control in chaotic, high-stakes environments. Joint Publication 3.0 echoes this as well.
This focus on judgment, on adapting,
Yeah.
it leads us directly to mission command. That seems like a cornerstone philosophy for decentralized operations,
Yeah.
especially for a force that has to operate globally.
It absolutely is. It's described as the critical operating philosophy. Mission Command, as Joint Publication 1, Volume 1 defines it, is essentially conducting military operations through decentralized execution based on mission-type orders.
Mission-type orders.
Meaning, instead of giving exhaustive step-by-step instructions, commanders focus their orders on the purpose of the operation, the what needs to be achieved, the desired end state, and clearly communicating their overall intent.
Okay, so you tell subordinates what to achieve and why, but not necessarily how to do it step by step.
That's the core idea. It pushes decision-making down to the lowest practical level.
But if you decentralize execution like that, how do you stop subordinates from maybe taking risks that violate the bigger strategic picture?
Yeah.
Doesn't that increase the potential for things going wrong for the Joint Force Commander?
That is the inherent tension, yes. It's the essential trade-off. The doctrine tries to mitigate that risk by demanding something called disciplined initiative.
Disciplined initiative.
Right. Subordinates are expected, even required, to act aggressively and independently when opportunities arise or the situation changes unexpectedly. But their initiative must always stay within the boundaries set by their understanding of the commander's overall intent and the concept of operations. They can't just go rogue.
So freedom to act, but within clear guardrails.
Exactly. The huge benefit is reduced communication bottlenecks, much faster tempo, increased agility in dynamic situations, things that are absolutely paramount when you're talking about global operations where conditions can change rapidly.
Before any military action even starts, though, there's that critical interface with civilian leadership. The doctrine calls it the civil-military dialogue and describes it as an unequal dialogue. What are the specific responsibilities of the senior military leader in that conversation?
Well, Joint Publication 1, Volume 1, characterizes it as a principal-agent relationship. The military, the agent, serves the civilian leadership, the principal. Senior military leaders have this unique, really solemn duty to provide honest, unvarnished advice and assessments before final objectives are set by the civilians.
Unvarnished assessments, meaning telling them what they need to hear, not just what they might want to hear.
Precisely. The goal is always to achieve a shared understanding of the operational problem. What's feasible, what's not, what are the risks?
And what specific information must the commander provide to make sure the shared understanding actually happens?
The commander needs to clearly articulate their understanding of the problem itself. They need to clarify any necessary assumptions they're making. And critically, provide a clear picture of, and this is almost a direct quote from Joint Publication 1, Volume 1, what actions military capabilities are capable of performing, the objectives these options can achieve, the costs and risks associated with each option, and how those options address the problem.
Costs and risks seem key there.
Absolutely. The doctrine demands clarity about constraints, limitations, and importantly, the potential second and third order effects of any proposed military action. What happens next and after that.
Okay, so once the mission is approved, the mandate is received. The Joint Force almost never operates in isolation. It requires what the doctrine calls unified action. Can you define that? It sounds like it involves more than just military branches working together.
Much more. Unified action represents the comprehensive effort needed to achieve true unity of effort across the board. Joint Publication 1, Volume 1 defines it as the synchronization, coordination, and alignment of the activities of governmental and non-governmental entities with military operations.
Governmental and non-governmental. So we're talking State Department, USAID, but also potentially international organizations, NGOs, even private companies.
Yes, exactly. It extends to multinational partners, international organizations like the UN or NATO, non-governmental organizations operating in the area, sometimes even private commercial partners who might control critical infrastructure, for example.
How realistic is it, though, to get genuine unity of effort when the Joint Force Commander doesn't actually have command authority over, say, Doctors Without Borders or a partner nation's ambassador?
That is the fundamental challenge, you're right. And it highlights why this relies on continuous communication, collaboration, building relationships, achieving consensus, not on giving orders.
So how do they facilitate that collaboration?
Well, to help bridge that gap, The combatant commander often establishes something called a Joint Interagency Coordination Group, or JIACG.
A Joint Interagency Coordination Group.
Right. This group is usually made up of representatives from various United States government departments and agencies, state, justice, treasury, whoever is relevant to the specific situation. Joint Publication 333 explains that the JIACG acts as a collaborative conduit. It promotes interaction, helps build consensus, and allows these non-military agencies to synchronize their plans and activities with the ongoing joint operations. It fosters that unity of effort without needing a formal command structure over everyone.
Okay, that makes sense. It's a mechanism for alignment, not command. Let's shift now to the actual nuts and bolts of organizing the forces. The doctrine uses flexible structures, and the most common one seems to be the Joint Task Force. How does a Joint Task Force differ from a more permanent command structure?
Good question. A Joint Task Force, or JTF, is specifically established for a finite mission and a defined operational role or objective. Joint Publication 1, Volume 2 points this out. Unlike, say, a subordinate unified command, which might be part of a combatant command's permanent structure and operate indefinitely, a JTF is designed to be created, tailored precisely to the unique needs of the mission at hand, and then, importantly, dissolved once its objectives are achieved.
So, temporary and mission-specific.
Exactly. Its structure, its size, its composition, it's entirely dependent on the specific operational environment and the task it's given.
But whether it's a temporary Joint Task Force or a permanent combatant command headquarters, the staff structure uses that standardized J-code system. We've touched on a few, like J3 for operations and J5 for plans. But Joint Publication 333 lays out the full structure, J1 through J9. Could we maybe walk through the critical functions of each of these directorates? It seems key to understanding how the headquarters actually functions.
Absolutely. The J-codes represent the functional organization the commander uses to manage all those complex systems and operations we've been discussing. And while the Joint Force Commander can tailor the staff based on the mission, this traditional structure provides a common framework and ensures all key functions are covered.
Okay, let's start at the top. J1, manpower and personnel. What's their main focus?
The J1 is responsible for, essentially, all things people-related. Their primary charge is accountability for all personnel within the joint operating area that includes military members, civilian employees of the DoD, and even contractors who are accompanying the force.
Accountability sounds critical, especially in a complex deployment.
It is. And Joint Publication 333 highlights another key J1 responsibility: planning for personnel rotation policies. They have to consider mission duration, operational tempo, and individual needs to manage force flow, which directly impacts morale, readiness, and long-term sustainability.
Okay, next up, J2, the Intelligence Directorate. Obviously vital, especially in that competition phase we talked about.
Immensely vital. The J2 provides the Joint Force Commander with intelligence support and also handles counterintelligence protection for the force. In the kind of complex, interconnected environment the doctrine describes, the J2's job is huge. They produce intelligence estimates, assessments, often running a joint intelligence operations center to fuse information.
Fusing information from where?
From everywhere. National agencies, service intelligence components, allied partners, sometimes even open source information. They need to integrate all this to support the commander's decision-making, especially regarding adversary intentions, capabilities, vulnerabilities across all domains: land, sea, air, space, and, of course, cyberspace.
Right, multi-domain awareness. Okay, J3, the Operations Directorate. You called this the central hub earlier.
It really is. The J3 is the commander's principal advisor on all operational matters. They're responsible for the actual direction and control of forces and execution. They typically run the Joint Operations Center, or JOC.
The JOC?
Yes, and the JOC, according to Joint Publication 333, focuses on the direct, monitor, assess, and plan functions for the commander.
Yeah.
Basically, the J3 manages the current fight, issues updated orders like fragmentary orders or fragos, and ensures the commander and the staff maintain a clear, up-to-date, common operational picture.
Keeping everyone on the same page, literally. All right, J4, logistics. You called this the lifeblood.
And it truly is. The J4 coordinates everything needed to sustain the force.
Yeah.
Supply, maintenance, transportation, deployment, and distribution plans, health services, engineering support. The list goes on.
A huge portfolio.
Massive. A major focus for the J4 is optimizing the use of what's called host nation support, or HNS.
Using local resources.
Exactly. Leveraging local resources, infrastructure, services provided by the host nation where forces are operating. Joint Publication 333 notes that effective host nation support can be a significant force multiplier. It reduces the burden on strategic lift planes and ships and can speed up sustainment efforts.
Makes sense. One important point Joint Publication 333 makes about logistics. Who actually has the authority?
That's critical. Only the combatant commander exercises what's called Directive Authority for Logistics, or DAFL. This gives them the authority to synchronize logistics across the different service components in their theater. However, the individual military services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Space Force, they retain responsibility for the actual sustainment of their own forces. The J4 helps the combatant commander orchestrate that.
Okay, J5, the Plans Directorate, the forward-looking part of the staff.
Right. While the J3 is focused on the current fight, the J5 is responsible for developing future plans, deliberate plans, contingency plans, concept plans. They often utilize a dedicated joint planning group, or JPG, specifically for crisis action planning or developing options for future operations.
So they're looking ahead, translating strategic guidance.
Precisely. Their job is to take that high-level strategic guidance we discussed earlier and turn it into detailed, feasible military options and orders. They have to coordinate very closely with the J3 to ensure there's a smooth transition between current operations and future plans.
Okay, we're halfway through the J codes. Let's keep going. J6, Communication System Directorate.
Yeah.
Sometimes called C4 systems.
Yes, Command, Control, Communications, and Computers, or C4. The J6 manages the absolutely crucial technical infrastructure that enables everything else. In a globally integrated environment spanning vast distances, the ability to communicate securely, reliably, it's paramount.
Can't operate without it.
You really can't. Joint Publication 333 mandates that the J6 provide communication support, manage information systems, and this is a huge challenge, ensure the necessary technical interoperability. Making sure the Army's radios can talk to the Navy systems, and both can talk to coalition partners. That's a massive technical undertaking, especially when you're trying to support that decentralized mission command philosophy.
A constant challenge, I imagine. All right, J7, Joint Force Development and Training. This seems to link back directly to that need for adaptable leaders we talked about earlier.
It does very directly. The J7 focuses on the readiness and the future capability development of the joint force. They oversee joint training programs, large-scale exercises, doctrine development, and lessons learned processes.
So making sure the force learns and improves.
Exactly. This directorate plays a key role in ensuring that the hard-won lessons from current operations are actually captured and integrated back into future doctrine and training. They are instrumental in fostering that agile, adaptive leadership the doctrine demands to cope with the inherent fog and friction of conflict.
Makes sense. J8, Financial Management or Resource Management. Sees practical military operations cost money.
A lot of money. The J8 manages the financial resources and provides fiscal oversight for the command. Joint Publication 333 requires them to advise the commander on budget preparation, budget execution, and importantly, cost analysis for different operational courses of action. Their role is critical for the long-term sustainment of operations and ensuring that resources are allocated efficiently across the vast and complex command structure.
Efficiency and accountability. Okay, last one. Just 9, Civil Military Operations or CMO. This seems to connect back to that unified action concept.
It does. The J9 is responsible for coordinating the commander's interaction with the civil dimension of the operational environment. That means working with civilian authorities, both host nation and international, local populations, humanitarian organizations, and other civil actors.
Why is that function so important?
It's vital for several reasons. Establishing legitimacy for the military presence, achieving strategic objectives by minimizing disruption to civilian life, coordinating humanitarian assistance if needed, and facilitating the restoration of essential services. Joint Publication 333 also emphasizes that the J9 plays a key support role in meeting that critical requirement for the protection of civilians and non-combatants throughout the entire operational area. It's about the interface between the military force and the human environment it operates in.
Okay, that's a comprehensive look at the staff structure. And that structure exists, fundamentally, to enable the execution of what the doctrine calls the 7 joint functions. These aren't staff sections, but fundamental capabilities or categories of activity.
That's exactly right. Joint Publication 1, Volume 1 lists these 7 common functions: command and control, information, intelligence, fires, movement and maneuver, protection, and sustainment. Think of them not as organizational boxes, but as related capabilities and activities that the Joint Force Commander has to synchronize and integrate to achieve objectives.
Okay, let's briefly touch on each. We've talked a lot about command and control already.
Right. Command and Control, or C2, is really the umbrella function that integrates everything else. It encompasses the means, the systems, the processes commanders use to exercise authority, direct forces, and synchronize operations. Crucially, the doctrine views C2 not as just a rigid hierarchy, but as an integrated network designed to enable mission command. It has to be robust enough to allow that decentralized execution while still maintaining the commander's overall authority and intent.
Next, intelligence. Clearly linked to the J2 directorate we discussed.
Absolutely. The intelligence function is all about providing that understanding the operational environment, the adversary, other relevant actors, and all the critical factors affecting mission accomplishment. Joint Publication 3.0 really stresses that intelligence needs to be predictive, anticipatory, and adaptive. It has to focus on those complex, interconnected systems we talked about at the beginning. It's not just about counting tanks anymore. It's about analyzing an adversary's political will, their information vulnerabilities, economic pressure points, especially in that competition space.
Okay, let's talk fires. The definition seems much broader now than just artillery or bombs.
It is significantly broader. Fires is defined as the use of weapon systems or other actions to create specific lethal or non-lethal effects on a target. Joint Publication 3.0 confirms this absolutely includes traditional capabilities, artillery, rockets, missiles, naval gunfire, close air support. But it explicitly integrates modern capabilities too. Things like cyberspace attack capabilities, offensive and defensive space operations, and electronic attack, like jamming.
You mentioned non-lethal effects. What's the strategic thinking behind formally including non-lethal weapons within the fires function?
That's a really important development. Non-lethal weapons are explicitly included, as Joint Publication 3.0 states, to provide commanders with intermediate force capabilities. They aim to fill the gap between just being present and having to use deadly force. The goal is to achieve desired effects like stopping personnel or disabling equipment, ideally with reversible effects, allowing commanders to de-escalate situations, manage complex scenarios like crowd control, or enforce things like maritime exclusion zones while minimizing casualties and collateral damage. This ties directly back to upholding that crucial policy regarding the protection of civilians.
Giving commanders more options. Okay, moving to information. You mentioned this runs constantly across that whole competition continuum.
It really does. The doctrine recognizes that virtually all military activities, even routine training exercises or ship deployments, have informational consequences. They send messages, intended or not. Joint Publication 3.0 states clearly that information efforts aim to influence, disrupt, corrupt, or usurp the decision-making of adversaries and enemies.
So it's offensive as well as defensive.
Both. And coordinating the message is key. The goal for the public affairs component, as noted in Joint Publication 333, is achieving unity of messaging, making sure that the themes, the narratives, the messages being communicated are coordinated not just within the military, but across all the relevant instruments of national power to reinforce those strategic objectives we talked about earlier.
Right, consistency is key. Okay, the protection function. This sounds pretty broad, securing the force and the mission itself.
It is broad, and deliberately so. Protection, according to Joint Publication 3.0, encompasses all the measures taken to preserve the effectiveness and survivability of all mission-related personnel, equipment, facilities, information, and infrastructure. It's about safeguarding our own capabilities.
What kinds of things fall under protection?
A wide range: defending against air and missile threats, cybersecurity to protect networks, physical security for bases, counter-surveillance, mitigating insider threats, personnel recovery, even conducting humane and lawful detainee operations falls under this function, and critically, the protection of civilians.
And that emphasis on civilian harm mitigation and response, CHMR, seems like a major strategic requirement now, doesn't it?
It's absolutely central. Joint Publication 3.0 is unequivocal. The credibility, the legitimacy of the entire joint operation, and ultimately the success of our strategic objectives often depend heavily on minimizing harm to civilian populations.
How is that practically implemented?
It led directly to the requirement for Joint Force commanders to designate a specific civilian harm mitigation and response officer. This individual, often supported by a dedicated cell, is responsible for coordinating and integrating these critical considerations throughout the entire joint planning process, during execution, and in assessments. Their focus is on understanding the risks to the populace and advising the commander on how to mitigate them.
A very significant role. Okay, next function, movement and maneuver. This sounds like the physical execution, getting forces where they need to be.
That's the essence of it. This function includes all the activities involved in moving forces to achieve a position of advantage relative to the adversary or to achieve other mission objectives. Joint Publication 3.0 emphasizes that movement and maneuver are inherently linked to the other functions, especially fires and protection. It requires complex synchronization to project power effectively, exploit enemy vulnerabilities, or secure key terrain.
And in that global integration model, this could mean moving forces across huge distances.
Exactly. It often means rapidly shifting forces not just within a theater, but potentially across combatant command boundaries. That requires seamless logistical support from the J4, reliable communications from the J6, and timely intelligence from the J2 to be successful.
Okay, last of the 7 functions. Sustainment. The comprehensive logistical effort we touched on with the J4.
Right. Sustainment is the provision of all the necessary resources, personnel services, and health service support required to maintain the operational tempo and endurance of the Joint Force. Joint Publication 1, Volume 1, makes it crystal clear. Continuous combat operations, or even persistent presence in the competition phase, depends entirely on robust, reliable sustainment.
So it covers everything needed to keep the force running.
Everything. Logistics like supply and maintenance, personnel services like finance and legal support, health services from battlefield care to hospitalization. It directly links back to the responsibilities of those J1, J4, and J8 staff directorates we discussed. It ensures the force remains ready and capable of operating across that entire competition continuum, potentially for extended periods.
Okay, we've covered the environment, the command structure, the staff, the core functions. Let's try to pull these threads together now by looking at how the doctrine connects the different levels of warfare, especially in the context of actually conducting a campaign.
That's a good way to integrate it all. The doctrine emphasizes that the 3 levels, tactical, operational, and strategic, must function as a coherent whole. They aren't firewalled from each other.
So starting at the bottom, the tactical level.
Right. The tactical level is where the fighting actually happens. It's the realm of battles, engagements, specific actions conducted to achieve military objectives assigned to subordinate units, squads, ships, aircraft sorties. Joint Publication 1, Volume 1, grounds military action here. It's about applying combat power in specific time and space.
And the operational level is the crucial link, the bridge between those individual tactical actions and the big picture strategic goals.
Exactly. This is where the commander's art really comes into play. At the operational level, Joint Force commanders, like combatant commanders or JTF commanders, identify sequences of objectives, they arrange operations, they allocate forces, all designed to conduct campaigns and major operations effectively. Joint Publication 3.0 emphasizes that this level is about linking the tactical employment of forces directly to achieving those strategic objectives set by national leadership.
Turning tactical success into strategic progress.
Precisely. It involves designing campaigns, sequencing major operations, managing resources across the theater, and understanding the broader implications of tactical actions.
And this sequencing of efforts over time, across a theater or even globally, that's essentially what campaigning is.
That's the definition. Joint Publication 1, Volume 1 defines campaigning as, and this is key, the persistent conduct and sequencing of military activities aligned with other instruments of national power to achieve prioritized objectives over time.
Persistent and aligned with other instruments. So it's not just military action in isolation.
Not at all. Effective campaigning requires the combatant commander to constantly maneuver, not just physically, but also informationally, diplomatically, integrating efforts across multiple domains, across different geographic areas, potentially over years, to maintain or gain advantage relative to competitors or adversaries. It's a long-term strategic approach.
Given that the Joint Force is likely already actively engaged in the competition phase, maybe conducting security, cooperation, or information operations, what does the doctrine say about the challenges of suddenly having to transition from that state into open armed conflict?
Joint Publication 3 Mail offers a pretty stark warning on this. It explicitly tells commanders, do not assume they will receive abundant warning time.
So be ready to shift gears fast.
Very fast. Preparation for potential armed conflict has to be persistent, woven into activities during competition. This might mean introducing protection assets like air defenses early on, integrating defensive plans with host nations, ensuring logistics are poised. The force posture that's optimized for, say, counterterrorism or information competition might need to rapidly shift to one suitable for high-intensity conventional warfare.
And even with all the detailed planning done by the J5, all the current operations management by the J3, the doctrine seems pretty realistic, almost skeptical about how well those plans will hold up once shooting starts.
Oh, absolutely. There's a healthy dose of realism embedded throughout. The doctrine explicitly recognizes the unchanging, chaotic nature of war itself. Joint Publication 3.0 states very clearly that the circumstances surrounding the outbreak of armed conflict rarely unfold as imagined.
Rarely unfold as imagined.
Right, so commanders must expect that the existing plan, no matter how detailed or well-rehearsed, will likely need changes, maybe significant changes, almost immediately upon the transition from competition to conflict. This demands constant adaptation, reassessment, and revision based on the actual situation, not just the pre-war assumptions.
That realism, that skepticism about plans,
Yeah.
it brings us right back around to those immutable characteristics of conflict we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
The whole idea of fog and friction.
Exactly. Joint Publication 1, Volume 1 spends significant time reminding us that war is, at its core, a fundamentally human endeavor. And because it's human, it's inherently characterized by uncertainty, unpredictability, chance, ambiguity, and frankly, human fallibility.
Things go wrong, information is incomplete, people make mistakes under pressure.
All of the above. And the danger, the physical stress, the fear inherent in combat dramatically magnify the effects of this fog and friction. It inevitably degrades situational awareness and the ability to make timely, optimal decisions. This really underscores why the doctrine places such a premium on the art of command that honed judgment, intuition, and adaptability of the commander becomes the most critical capability when facing the unexpected.
So if constant change, uncertainty, and the need for adaptation are the enduring realities, what's the ultimate conclusion this body of doctrine reaches about the future of military leadership itself? What's the takeaway for developing future commanders?
The doctrine is very clear on this point. Institutional adaptation is not just desirable, it's required. Joint Publication 1, Volume 1 explicitly states, and this feels like a mandate, that the Joint Force must revise our leader development programs and our joint professional military education to enable the development of adaptable and agile leaders.
Revise education and development to
Yep.
foster what specifically?
The core mission, as laid out, is to develop strategically and operationally minded joint warfighters. Leaders who can think critically, creatively, who can anticipate change, operate across domains and with diverse partners, and ultimately prevail in what the doctrine calls the changing character of war.
Developing those critical, creative thinkers. Leaders who can thrive in this globally integrated, constantly competitive, often ambiguous, and decentralized operating environment. That really seems to be the central challenge and mandate coming out of this advanced joint warfighting doctrine.
It is arguably the fundamental requirement for success in the complex security environment of the 21st century.
Well, thank you. This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the complex blueprint for advanced joint warfighting doctrine. I think for you, the listener, perhaps the ultimate takeaway is this. The challenge facing senior military leaders today isn't just about knowing the doctrine, the J-codes, the functions. It's about mastering the art of applying it all within a dynamic, interconnected system where the unexpected isn't the exception, it's off to the norm. So the final thought to leave you with is, what implications does this constant driving need for adaptation for critical thinking under pressure have for your own professional development, regardless of your field? Something to consider as you reflect on this complex strategic landscape.